Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, dear colleagues, I am happy to greet everyone. Today we have an opportunity to meet an excellent researcher, Igor Okunev, and learn more about his latest book. Through his presentation, we can see what research is on agenda at the internationally renowned MGIMO, which is Moscow State Institute of International Relations. And we can also see how Igor Okunev and his team approach the analysis of our region. Igor Okunev has a master's degree in history from the University of Manchester and a doctoral degree in political science from MGIMO University. He is a professorial research fellow at MGIMO University and director of its Center for Spatial Analysis in International Relations. He is a co-chair of a research committee on geopolitics at the International Political Science Association. His work focuses on political geography, critical geopolitics, federalism, and capital cities. This year, he published an English textbook on political geography. In his textbook, Igor Okunev offers a full, truly inclusive overview of a subject. I must mention that my excellent colleagues are taking part in our conversation today. Nikolett Garai, her research primarily covers the Visegrad 4 countries, and Viktor Eszterhai, who specializes in political geography and geopolitics, in addition to his research on China. And now about the structure of today's conversation in a few words. First of all, our guest will give a presentation in about 40-50 minutes. After that, my colleagues can ask their questions and comment on today's topic. And finally, we will open a Q&A session to engage our guests and partners in this dialogue. All participants are kindly requested to enter their questions during the presentation using the Q&A Zoom feature. As usual, we will spend a little over an hour on today's event. And with that, Igor, I give the floor to you.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to be with you and to have this opportunity to present some of my research. This is this book that was published by Peter Lang this year. It was first written in Russian, and it was just recently translated and published in Polish, which was a huge surprise for me that it was Poland and Polish Geopolitical Society that first asked for the rights on this book and do it very quickly. And I know that next translation will be even more interesting. It will be Mongolian language, which of a higher surprise for me. Well, and probably some other translations will follow. This book was written at MGIMO as a new approach how to teach political geography to our students. The thing is that we start at MGIMO teaching international relations. We don't have geography. We prepare specialists in international relations and mainly diplomats. So we start their preparation with political geography. So that should be not a course with many theoretical and methodological approaches that you could give at some master level. That should be a textbook, very basic textbook, but that will guide you through the world political map. So it's not just an explanation where we have what, but some which is usually, unfortunately, understood least in Russia, from geography, students at least. So that's an approach that gives some, as I call it, periodical table of elements of world political map. So all the elements we have and we could have in political space on different levels, from global to local, are structured here in this textbook, and they give this systematical overview of world political map. And when students pass this class, they are ready for history of international relations, theory of international relations, and many other aspects that they follow. And then we meet with students at the very end of their preparation at the second year of their master degree. And to become a diplomat in Russia, you need to have master diploma. And we have another course which is called Spatial Analysis in International Relations, and it will be more connected with my research and what I will be speaking today. So we start and we finish with political geography with different approaches. And this textbook was just new approach how to teach political geography. Now we work also on a textbook and online course. This textbook is available as an online course, both in Russian and in English, on Coursera. And now we work on new textbook and new online courses on spatial analysis, on using spatial econometrics and GIS, geoinformation systems, modeling for political geography. So we're working to have a textbook, to have online course to teach our students and our partners with this methodology. 2 years ago, at MGIMO, it was established this Center for Spatial Analysis in International Relations. And it is part of so-called Institute for International Studies. Inside of MGIMO, we have a research think tank mainly working for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Not that open as usually think tanks should be, while we are trying to make it more open. But working for many decades, it was very old idea in the Soviet time to establish a think tank at MGIMO that will provide ministry with expertise. And it works for many decades. But just 2 years ago, inside of this center, there was a feeling that we need to form special group of geographers, because there are some changes in international affairs that geographers should come and to explain. So we receive every year some tasks to provide expertise for the ministry. So there are issues in political geography that are in interest of the ministry. First are regional level of international relations, paradiplomacy. We see increase of transregional trade, transregional contacts, transborder conflict contacts. We see, for example, that this is probably the last area of cooperation between Russia and European Union that still works nowadays, transregional and transborder cooperation in these turbulent times. So our ministry is really interested in this. We see increasing number of contacts with regions, European regions and Russian regions. And this is some area of potential growth. Another area of expertise will be electoral geography, because we now see that foreign affairs in most countries became dependent more and more on internal election circles. And of course, those election circles, to be understood, should be analyzed from geographic perspective as well. So to understand foreign relations, we look into electoral geography of difference. So those probably are two main areas of expertise that we provide. The center was established, but in addition to this, we do some fundamental work. And I would say our main scope, we want to transform the methodology of spatial analysis, which is widely developed for physical geography or economical geography, to the political geography, where we rarely see this. We see this sometimes in terms of elections analysis, only on one level of one country. So we don't have any methodology to compare electoral geography of different countries. So we want to develop this methodology and to use this tools to analyze world political map, global scale of international relations, which is also quite a rare case where we have. So we are now mainly on this step of developing methodology, rather than we could really predict and give you some results. Now I will show you something of our last research, which we called Atlas of International Relations, and I will try to make a focus in this atlas on integration groups, in particular European, Eastern European groups, and with some applications for Visegrad group. While I need to say that this project was done on a global scale, and of course to have better results, we should continue probably this project on a level, on the European or Eastern European level, collect more data on a regional level, and then we could have better, with the same methodology, we could have better results, and probably that could be some projects for mutual work between our two institutes or some other partners. I will turn on the presentation. So this geostatistical atlas, this is not a normal atlas. This is a statistical atlas. We printed it in Russian. So the first version was already published, but now we did absolutely new version that we hopefully will publish in English next year or in a year, depending on how it will take much time review process. That's a continuation of this tradition of what was called new political geography, movement that happened in the States in the 70s, where there was this idea to use mathematics to analyze neighborhood effect in geography. And there were some articles on this, but then because there wasn't enough soft at this moment, this new political geography did not develop as, for example, new economic geography developed. So I think we are at this point of this huge turn to the new political geography with qualitative and quantitative methodology, more strict methodology. So we decided to assess the spatial effect on world political map. There is widely used first law of geography by Walter Tobler, that everything affects everything, but those things that are near affects better or stronger. The only thing how to measure this near. We decided to measure this near through the neighborhood. So we possess this idea that neighboring countries should, by first law of geography, by geography fundamental principle, should affect their neighborhood. So there should be some effect, like if country is surrounded by democracies, it should be more democratic. Or other way, if country is democratic, probably surrounding should be more democratic or tend to be more democratic. Or other way, if we have conflicts in a country, there should be some potential for conflicts in the neighboring countries. Of course, we understand that state borders were introduced not to have spatial effect, to stop geographical law, first law of geography. We establish sovereignty and we establish states just for this. So we see it now quite good on these pandemics. Well, in ideal, well, not ideal, but the world without states, pandemic will grow from person to person exactly by first law of geography. The neighborhood effect will determine the distribution of pandemics. But hopefully for some countries and unfortunately for some other countries, the distribution of pandemic is dependent not only on geography, but on institutions, on how state borders works, on how integration blocks are working. So social structures, including global one, regional one, national one, well, they could stop the distribution of any effect by the law of geography. So we want to measure to what extent some effects in different areas, in demographics, in economics, in politics, in ecology, in very many different areas. In what areas we have higher degree of spatial distribution by geography, by first law of geography, where neighborhood effect works, and in what areas it does not work. And of course, when we measure this, we want, well, sometimes from terms of statistics, it does not determine some effect, this neighborhood effect. But, well, for example, in electoral geography, it is, we have it in the literature that neighborhood effect adds something like 5% to the electoral result. Well, which is not many for statistics. This is something we could neglect. But for any electoral campaign, those 5% could be, well, of the highest interest for the candidates. So even if spatial effect does not determine, and it is rarely determined, it adds some effect. Well, we should know this and we should control this spatial effect. We collected 110 indicators, open statistics for all countries, for all UN members, and we worked with some soft and programming here, and did this atlas, and I will show some of the methods of this atlas. Coming to the idea of this seminar, how we could measure integration through this methodology. Well, there is an idea inside of the regional integration theory that more similar countries tend to integrate better. Well, we know that sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes there are different countries could integrate because of some external factors. But still, or we could say that inside of the integration system, let's call it, we have integration systems, European, Eurasian, Southeast Asian, and some others, where we have some combination of integration structure. So in this integration system, we could have some sub-regional blocks, some regional structures that are more integrated, like Visegrad group, like Benelux, like if we speak about Eurasian Union, that will be a union between Russia and Belarus. So what, how to check this? Well, in terms of spatial analysis, that means that neighborhood effect in this sub-regional group will be higher. Those countries will be more similar to each other than to the non-neighboring countries of this block. So we could check the hypothesis. Why we need this sub-regional groups? Well, they resemble Russian matryoshka. that inside of one block we have a smaller block. And well, for example, for integration in Eurasian space, I see very clear the role of this union between Russia and Belarus, which is highly criticized because many scholars say that it is ineffective and why we need another integration group inside of Eurasian Economic Union. But it works. In what sense? That's a test. So if we want to promote any integration idea for Eurasian Economic Union, first we test it on a union between Russia and Belarus. If it does not work, if we can't negotiate and if we can't come to compromise inside of this small group of two countries with Belarus, well, there is senseless to try to implement this for the whole Eurasian Economic Union. So at least one of these functions of this more integrated sub-regional blocks is, well, those testing on where far we could go with that of this particular integration idea. Okay, so let me now tell you about some of the methods in this atlas. Well, the most important in measuring neighborhood effect is to give to the soft an idea who are your neighbors, who to analyze as a neighbors. For this, you need to produce weights metrics. And the problem is that, well, when you analyze 10,000 dots, which we usually do in physical geography, well, it's quite easy to build these weights metrics. But when you analyze just 193 countries, and you have such a difficult, comprehensive world political map where we have huge countries, small countries, countries concentrated in one region, and some continents with 1 or 3 countries, it's very difficult to produce a mathematical algorithm how to count the neighbors. Because if you just will take countries that have the same borders, then you will leave countries on islands aside. If you say, well, just find the nearest countries, you will need to provide in what radius there would be the nearest countries. And if you take 1,000 kilometers, which will be a minimum radius to find the first neighbor for Russia, well, most European countries will be neighbors to each other. So you can't find one approach here. That's why we just make this matrix manually. We call it geography matrix, where we add judicial borders between the states, and those countries that have less than 3 countries, we enlarge the number of their neighbors up to the 3. So we found the nearest countries to them to have at least 3 neighbors for each country to measure the spatial effect. But this approach, this manually constructed weights metrics, lead us to the idea that we could program some geopolitical space, not physical space. We have this idea that what if we could understand global political space as a space constructed by economic and political blocks. Imagine we have blocks, we have continents on the world, constructed by geopolitical integration blocks. NATO, one, Eurasian Economic Union, another, ASEAN, the third, and so on. So neighbors will be members of the same block. Of course, we measured this neighborhood. So like in geography, we measured this neighborhood, so countries that, well, for example, Russia and Belarus weighted higher than neighborhood between Russia and the US. We measured it through the distance between the capital cities. And the membership in the integration group, full membership or associated membership, was some data that we used to measure the membership in geopolitical bloc. But we divided the world in those continents, in 14 continents, in 14 geopolitical blocks. Well, of course, we could do, we could argue here, and we could have another, we could divide the world in bigger, smaller number of geopolitical blocks, or we could divide it into historical blocks or cultural, civilizational blocks. Well, this is just ground for us to think. The most important for us here was to produce this methodology, because if we produce those in another type of geopolitical metrics, then we could possess this question: in what type of the world, in physical world or in geopolitical world, the spatial effect, neighborhood effect, is higher? Our hypothesis was that in geopolitical world produced by geopolitical blocks, the geopolitical effect, spatial effect, should be higher because regional integration is made mainly by countries that face similar risks and problems, and more similar countries tend to integrate. As we found at the end that in physical world, our hypothesis was wrong. In physical world, neighborhood effect works 1.5 times higher than in geopolitical world in general. This physical borders better and gives us understanding how it works. When we produce,
Igor, sorry to interrupt you, but can you change the slides, please? Because we received some comments that it would be better to change the slides as well according to your presentation.
Well, I will open it once again.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
Sure. It should work, because I hope you see now. In speaking about possible project, how to analyze sub-regional group, we could produce sub-regional metrics with spatial metrics for sub-regional groups like Visegrad group and some other Benelux and so on, to see. Of course, it's huge work to do. I didn't do this for this presentation, but this is a potential for future research. How spatial autocorrelation is measured? It's very simple. It's very simple. Well, we have on X some indicator. Well, here we took democracy. And on Y, we have lag democracy, lag indicator. So medium on this indicator in the neighboring states. So if we have correlation between level of one indicator in country and the level of the same indicator in the neighboring countries, that means that we have this spatial effect. And as a result, well, for example, we did for democracy, and you see for this particular indicator, in geopolitics metrics, we have a little bit higher correlation of 0.6 in comparison to geography, where we have 0.55. So in geopolitical world, in geopolitical blocks, we have higher tendency of correlation between democracies and their neighbor. But this is just one figure that doesn't give us real understanding, because that means for example, that in some part of the world, we have some cluster of countries with democracy. And in some other part of the world, we have another cluster, non-democracies surrounded by non-democracies. While for many other countries in the middle of this graph, well, there won't be high dependency. So we want to see this part, this block, and for this we use LISA, a local indicator of spatial association index, and it gives us these blocks. Well, for example, in geography, you see we have democracies in European countries and non-democracies in Asian and African countries. In geopolitical,
sorry, Igor,
yes?
just it's for some reason we can't move your presentation. So
yeah, so we are seeing the first slide. It's probably because it only entered for you, the presentation view. Maybe it sometimes happens to me as well.
Do you see now? Also not?
yes, but can you
I changed the slides now?
no.
No, it doesn't work. Oh, what about this?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
I don't know what problem. So those was graphs, and here is those maps of clusters. In red, clusters of democracies surrounded by democracies. In blue, non-democracies surrounded by non-democracies. In light red, we have exceptions. Democracies, but surrounded by non-democracies. And in light blue, we have exceptions other way. We have non-democracies surrounded by democracies. And those exceptions probably are most interesting for this analysis. Well, let me try. 1 second. I want to show you. 1 second. I just hope you will see. I just analyzed the whole atlas. Fine. Do you see the maps? I'm just changing them now. Doesn't work.
Okay.
Okay. I will because I just analyzed. I will come back to the present. Because I analyzed the whole atlas and to find those indicators. Hope you see now the LISA map, where we have Visegrad group, where we see Visegrad group, and where we see a difference between Eastern Europe and Visegrad group with Western people. And there were some indicators, like, for example, investments or external investments, or number of internal credits, or number of aged population, or number of women. So there were some indicators in which we see what here, for example, here we don't see much of the difference between Visegrad and other Europe, but there were some indicators that I found in our atlas that shows this significant difference, and that shows that Visegrad group produces some spatial group not only in terms of politics, but in terms of their similarity between each other and dissimilarity with some other countries in the Union. While there were some other indicators where Visegrad group was split into different clusters. So, well, of course, I can't make any assessment here because to go and to analyze Visegrad group, we need to go to the regional level and to the level of region. Of course, being on the countries level with 4 countries, we will have so high degree of statistical mistake. So this is just a potential. Okay.
I think we again not seeing your latest slide. Yes, see, now it's okay.
Well, another method was to so-called neighborhood test. So when we take neighbors of a country, we took 16 because 16 is the highest number of physical neighbors in this world in countries, and we took statistical neighbors. So we have imagine country X. Well, let's take Russia. We have 16 neighbors. Of what we found 16 neighbors nearest countries for all countries. And how many of those 16 physical neighbors will be our statistical neighbors, will be countries with more similar to us in one particular parameter. And for example, for Russia, you see there won't be many of them. But well, for Russia, probably this is also a mistake because when you measure 16 neighbors for Russia, if you take the centroid of Russia, all the neighbors of Russia will be in Asia. But you see that, for example, this is the same parameter, democracy. It forms some clusters of interdependency. So we have some regions in Europe where among neighbors there will be 6, 7, even 7 statistical neighbors. That's another method that shows us this similarity. And because we have most of the similarity in Europe, that gives us a clue that probably that's the continent with the best possibility. We also could measure geographically weighted regression here. For example, for democracy, we took the model number of aged population, number of taxes. This is in plus, and in minus will be less conflicts and less married people. And this regression model, this combination, described as dissemination of democracies on the world on 66%, which is quite high. But well, this is just ordinary regression, linear regression. But if we measure it in geographical terms, if we leave only neighbors for measurements. For each country, we leave neighbors. Or other way, what we did here, we exclude neighbors from the measurement. So that's another way to understand neighborhood effect. We exclude neighbors, and that gives us understanding that we have an opposite non-geographical influence. But to get to this idea, we need to work with geography. So in geopolitic metrics, geographical regression was even higher, was 77% was the number that explained, and now there's 4 parameters explain distribution of democracies in the world, even higher. It needs to say that that's quite a rare case. We measured pretty much 14 million regression models, and only 7, we found only 7 where there was a significant spatial effect, where we could say that this is space that affects, or we could say that this is space that does not affect the distribution. Because in linear regression, we have spatial neighborhood effect inside of it. We can't say whether this is democracies are democracies because of the neighborhood or because of some other things. So this is the method by which we could exclude spatial effect from linear regression. And as I said, that's quite a rare example. It produces as those kind of maps. For example, this is the map for this regression with these 4 models, where we see the standard deviation from this model. In red, those countries that most represent where democracy is highly correlated with combination of those 4 parameters, and in blue, countries that where democracy is not correlated. So this regression model works for other countries in yellow and countries in red, but does not work for countries in blue. Well, this is something that statisticians are not doing. They just give us the number that explain all observations. But in the real world, we want to see where in what parts of the world this regression model works and where it doesn't work. And for example, here, well, we can't explain what happens in Eurasian Union with this regression model for democracy. Well, it works for most all other countries. So this is something, well, probably a new step when geographers would put regression on the map. I found one regression model where we have some special position of Visegrad group. This is a regression model for high-tech technology. So high-tech technologies is dependent on a number of researchers, on internet, on the spread of internet, and on a number of royalties we receive, well, for books, for music, for any production. So this model explains distribution of high-tech of countries that produce high-tech technology. And you see here we don't have countries with significant difference with this in blue, where we have difference with standard deviation, except for Iceland. In Iceland, this model won't explain. This model will be the best for India, well, some other countries, while it represents pretty much the whole world. And we see here that we see some special group. Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Belarus. Those 5 countries, well, most of them are in the Visegrad group, except Poland, of course. Well, this group will explain this model higher than for other European countries. So using this method of analysis, we could see how well, the same regression model works differently for different countries. This model works generally for most of the countries. For most of the countries, it will explain, let's say, 55% distribution. But for some countries, this model will explain much more. And this is something we could have from this analysis. And probably the last type of analysis that I would propose here is, sorry, I left it in Russian, this multidimensional scaling. Multidimensional scaling. So we thought, what if the spatial effect is absolute. We live in a world of Tobler's law, and well, we live in a world where more similar countries comes closer to each other, and dissimilar countries get far away from each other. So how the world would look like if we have this law as an absolute. And this is the graph we received on analysis of all 110, not 100, but excluded geographical fundamental parameters, only statistical parameters we took. And we found that the world looks like this. For example, here will be United States, which is most different from the other world. Here will be China, which also quite different. And probably that gives us understanding that those are great powers, most different from the other world. I will concentrate on Visegrad group countries here. As well, here on the left, we have European Union countries left, and here Eurasian Union countries left. So as you see, European Union countries are quite different here. Well, here will be, and Eurasian Union countries are quite different as well. While in general, we have those countries in Europe more close to the left, to the group of more developed countries, of course, and here on the right, there will be less developed African, let's say, countries, and Eurasian Union will be closer to those right corners. While Visegrad groups, they will be very close to each other. They will be here, those four countries. Yes, something like this. And for example, this country, the most different country from Eurasian Union will be Russia. So it's the most close to the Visegrad, even not Belarus, in those different parameters. Well, we did this in 3D dimensions, and those in yellow are Visegrad groups. You see they are quite similar, which probably really gives us this understanding that we have this biggest similarity between those countries that propose opportunity better integration between those countries. So with this, I will finish my presentation. I need to say once again, to underscore once again, that we are now in political geography in the world, not only in our center, in a very interesting point. We're in a shift where we could use geostatistical methods in political geography, in geopolitics, which is good and bad. Well, this is good because new methods, well, looks interesting and something new and gives some opportunities for new research, but which is bad because we mainly should work now on methods. We still don't have good methods and good understanding how they work, and we really can't explain a lot at this moment, and we don't have enough statistics and enough shape files and so on. So if some politicians comes and say, well, predict me when we have a war and with what country should we trade better, well, unfortunately, we're not in the point where we could do some statistics and answer this question, while unfortunately some those who ask us for expertise are looking for this. We need to develop, we need to work on methods. And this is something our center is concentrating on, but we are really open for cooperation, for producing some atlases or for some spatial regions where we could provide methodology and our experience here, while our partner could statistics and analysis of those data that they will receive from this methods. And of course, our partner will be better in the field they are working with than we who just work on the method. And we are very open for cooperation in this. And probably this textbook will be once translated and will help you also in Hungarian. That will be great. Thank you very much. I would like to hear your questions.
Thank you very much for your very interesting analysis and presentation. I will ask my colleague, first of all, Viktor Eszterhai, to comment on this topic and ask some questions maybe, and then give to the floor to Nikolett Garai.
Thank you, Gyorgy, and thank you, Igor, as well. Congratulations for this very, I would say, innovative research direction. I myself also teach political geography and also teach geopolitics. So I have to agree with you that the methodological programs you raised are at the beginning are really several and important. And I have to say that we should lack good methodological tools, and especially this is a problem because we won't be able to predict with these poor methodological tools that we have in political geography. So I think your research is extremely important and innovative, and obviously we only had a very short introduction of your research, and during your presentation there were two questions in my mind. First is related to your indicators. So all your indicators were based on or created based on state level. And in your research, not necessarily in your presentation, but in your research, do you also put special emphasis on sub-state level indicators too? So that would be my first questions. And second, partially connected also to this first question, that what could be the relationship between the neighborhood effect and hierarchical diffusion? So hierarchical diffusion became a very relevant concept in the era of globalization in political geography due to the time-space compression, what we have to see as a result of globalization. So have you ever considered what could be the relationship of hierarchical diffusion and the neighborhood effect? So that would be my second question to Igor. And of course, I know that's quite a challenging one. So.
Thank you. Well, we never thought about hierarchical diffusion. This is really a good question, but I'm not ready to answer this. Sorry. Well, I could answer something senseless, but I would probably save this question because this is really, I start thinking about this.
So sorry to interrupt you. So due to globalization, there is a time-space compression. So the points which are in connection, some of the points which are in connection or have higher level of connections will be closer in space. So that's a kind of a challenging concept as a result of globalization in political geography. So you also mentioned the spread of viruses. So this kind of hierarchical diffusion explains also why some dots or hubs on our Earth were affected faster than others. So, and this could have been a very interesting concept related to neighborhood effect as well. So because there are some points which are closer to each other due to this hierarchical diffusion and time-space compression. So that's how my question is pointing into this. And also this is also challenging the state level indicators as well. So maybe some sub-state level indicators will have a different relationship, and then just to investigate everything on a state level. So this, could I explain it better to you?
Yes, absolutely, okay, absolutely. I remember we had a research that we have a city, Rybinsk, next to Moscow. Well, how to say next, 300 kilometers north to Moscow, but we have a train there every 2 days that goes to this city. And we have flights to, and this train goes for 9 hours. And we have flights to New York 3 times a day. So New York is much closer than Rybinsk. Yes. I think, well, first we could measure this neighborhood or distance. Well, not in kilometers. We could measure this in time. We could measure this in money. We could measure this in our inspiration. How we understood those routes, how we are close mentally. So, well, those would be some different approaches to measure the distance, and this is something we could work on. Another possibility is what called spatial network analysis. What our foes are doing when we order taxi, he's doing exactly this. He's measuring the distance for taxi, not in kilometers, but in time, in money, and in a number of crossroads and traffic. Yes, and this type of analysis, we didn't try this. Why? Because in this type of analysis, you need to have the point from which you start counting. So if you count from Moscow, then you could produce a distance measure for all countries or for all cities. But it will be absolutely different measurement, for example, for Budapest. So we wanted to find methodology where we could compare all the countries. And in this network analysis, you always need to have the starting point for the measurement. But that's probably a very interesting field to progress. And speaking about sub-level, yes, of course, in our plans to go to the sub-level, because as high as you have number of observations, if you increase number of observations, you receive better statistics. This is number one. First, we want to see, of course, we don't want to see the countries like dots without internal differences. Yes, of course, and especially for Russia, those internal differences will play a lot for those countries. As the next step after the atlas or on the global level, we want to make an atlas on Eurasian Union and to collect statistics for regions of those countries in Eurasian Union. We have another project where we do comparison electoral analysis, electoral geography. So we collected for countries neighboring with Russia. So we collected data on election results on the lowest level where we have a statistics for all neighboring countries for Russia for 4 election circles. And now we are trying to find whether we have some cross border effect on different parts of Russian neighborhood in terms of electoral behavior. And sometimes we see this effect, and to see this cross-border effect, of course, you need to go to this sub-national level. So, of course, this is just the next step, and this is necessary. The problem here is with statistics, of course, and next we need to have files with geographical coordinates for those regions. And for example, even in Russia, well, we still don't have official borders for Russian municipalities. We still have conflict between 2 republics in North Caucasus, Ossetia and Ingushetia, and they don't have borders between the municipalities. So there is still no official map of Russian municipalities. So even for Russia, we can't do this. Well, we could produce this map, but it won't be official. Of course. So that's a huge problem. We still don't have enough data for working on this. But, well, of course, we want to do this.
Nikolett?
So thank you very much first to sharing us your book. Actually, when we met in Armenia a couple of weeks ago, and you presented about the same topic, I think You mentioned a lot of interesting things that got me thinking ever since then. So I know that the topic back that time wasn't specifically about sub-regional groupings, but for me, this approach, I think it's very interesting because when we do, I'm coming from international relations and politics. So basically, when we would like to understand sub-regional groupings and their behavior and the ways how they cooperate with each other, we most of the time turn to rather qualitative methodologies. And I think that spatial analysis could be a very interesting way to add more nuances when we would like to explain the extent and the reasons behind sub-regional cooperations and why specific sub-region intends to do cooperation on a greater level. And when you were talking about the V4, I just wanted to ask you that you mentioned that there are certain indicators which you looked out, and basically there were certain indicators which were very different than from Western countries. So could you elaborate a bit on that? So which were those indicators that looked very different? That's my first question, and I have other questions as well, but I think we can go with the first one.
Well, probably you could ask all your questions. I will answer them.
Okay, that was my first question. The second question is about the maps that you showed us. You mentioned that there are certain regression models which work for certain parts of the world, but not for the others. And I know that this question is not really about statistics anymore, because with statistics you can uncover certain connections, but other measures are needed to explain why a model works in certain region and doesn't work in another. So when you were talking about the blue parts where models are not working, sorry, do you have any explanation why they don't work in these specific regions and work in other ones? Or is it a too hard question?
Well, starting with your second question, well, it's not a difficult question, but just any explanation of me will be well, without any scientific ground. So I don't have knowledge. I'm not a specialist in, we did this indicators, aged population, married population, conflicts, taxes. I'm not specialist in demographics, in economics, so that I could explain really this combination. So I probably won't try to do this because, well, we mainly in any regression, the data we could work is when it explains. So when it explains, we could work with this data. When it doesn't work, we only could say that it doesn't work, and we need to find another model probably that will explain. Like if with this last multidimensional scaling, we could explain similar close countries, why they're close, because they are close on those parameters. But if one country is different, is an exception, we can't explain why it is different, in what particular sphere it is different. So those methods could explain similarities, but can't explain differences. While there are some other methods, which I did not present here, which could explain exceptions, but can't understand the similarities. Well, speaking about the parameters that just now open, where we have, you asked different differences between V4 group, yes?
Yeah.
Or differences between different European countries? Or was it differences inside Visegrad group?
No, between the Western groups and the V4.
I got it. I got it. Well, the parameters was the following: Gini index, so difference between most wealthy and less wealthy people. GDP per capita. Interesting. Film production. Femme population, ladies population, export and export of high technologies, diplomatic intensity of diplomatic contacts, which we also measured, number of credits, internal and external credits, ecology, CO2, how much we have those ecology problems, and aged population, percentage of aged population, and I think that's it from what I have learned. But once again, that I would not make from this any conclusion on for a particular country. I could say that in those parameters we have some cleavage between Western and Eastern Europe. Yes, that won't work for any particular.
Yeah, okay. So maybe your methods can be used in further research when we would like to explain certain differences. So thank you for the answer.
Yes, thank you for questions. We have one interesting question here in Q&A feature. So I will try to read it. What is your position on neighborhood effects in Serbia and North Macedonia, where the Russian influence has become stronger when in our Balkan countries? And connected to this, which EU sub-regional group could we join after the EU accession? So, you know, for Hungary, especially very important Western Balkans, and we always try to be on top of this region and understand it better.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I think Russia is really interested in good relations with all the Balkan. It happened that we traditionally had better relations with those two countries, and probably also with Serbian Republic of Bosnia and it happened traditionally, firstly because of the religion, of course, and I think also it was caused by the fact that in many historical events, Russia was protecting Orthodox, those there on the Balkans, and we have this memory, especially among Serbians and Macedonians. While I need to say we have a bad memory of Russian influence as well there. For example, for Macedonians, as I know, they during the Stalin time, they were one of the main victims in Yugoslavia. And this is something they could blame Russia or Soviet Union and Soviet policy for. So there's always something in history that disconnects you than something that connects you. So I think with those two countries, those connections with Russia are mainly in cultural, historical, religious area. We shouldn't think that that leads to closer political or economic ties. Not always, and not in this case. Of course, in terms of politics and economics, we see that those countries, step by step, are becoming closer to the European Union, and when they will, well, they want to join the European Union, and that's the choice, and hopefully they one day will join that, and hopefully that won't bring those countries to any new contradictions with huge blames. Well, what sub-regional group they could join? Well, I think they themselves possess some. So those former Yugoslavic republics, they're more similar to each other than to any other group that they inside of European Union, when they will be this joining of the same integration group probably will be the path to more interdependence and cooperation between those countries and to less conflicts between them. And I think that will open a path for their traditional historical roots, cultural roots to play, and to make those countries more close, more cooperating between each other. So I hope that when those all Balkan countries will join European Union, if this will happen, they will be able to possess new, very strong group and act together.
Thank you very much. I want to ask you one quick question. You have a chapter in the book on borders, and can you briefly summarize how your book defines and analyzes the concept of borders? So some new developments in this broad area. Because, you know, again, in Russia, this is a strong field of science, because Russia has most borders in the world, maybe. So it is interesting how Russian scientists think about this special concept.
Well, I need to say that we argue on this concept. We have different positions, and I represent my own. While we, in our Institute of Geography, something like 2 years ago, they published huge volume on Russian borders by Professor Polosov and his group, and they did really huge work. Not all the countries, not most of the countries has so analyzed and described borders of what we argue, I would possess that, well, in my perspective, while now we all hate borders because borders produce us problems, but if we will live in a world where there won't be any borders anymore, people will reproduce the borders instead of states. Because I think borders is something we really need. We don't need it in terms of we don't stay on the border for passport control, and we don't have new visa. But because of our nature, borders is something we really love and we're really interested in. So I have many examples where people were asking, well, if they were crossing the border and did not receive the stamp, they were asking to put the stamp, or they were judging that they were unhappy that they did not receive the stamp, or people that making photos. For example, we did a research on Estonian-Latvian border, where there never really was a border, but now they have their border like a tourist site, and people are coming there and making photos there. So, of course, today borders is something we want to elaborate, to decrease the negative effect on the borders on population. While, by the way, that's interesting. Well, when you have, for example, in European Union borders that you do not feel when you cross it, that does not mean that you have less border in terms of institutions. So to have less feeling of a border, you need to have more bordered institutions. So you need to have many cooperations, exchange of regulations, exchange of lists, and a lot of management. So to have less felt border, you need to have more institutionalized border. Well, for example, this is something we don't have on Russian-Belarus border. It is open, but we don't have enough institutions to regulate this border, and that there's some problems sometimes. But even when we will have in some parts of the world where we won't feel any borders, people will reproduce borders. Why? Well, I give this funny example. Why we celebrate New Year in this world for the whole world? What is special in the New Year? There is nothing happened in New Year. Even Jesus Christ was not born on this date. But that's the most celebrated day in the world. Why? Because this is a time border. That's a border in time, and we need this border, well, to congratulate, to think about something positive, to live in the future positive things, and to live in the past negative things, to rethink about who we are and what we want to do. We need those time borders. The same for geography borders. Geography borders, this is not only for politics and for regulation like they usually understood. Space borders are something that helps us to understand who we are. And without this, we can't do this. And we will reproduce this border in some other ways. And those mental borders probably are even more important than those borders we have on the map and that are regulated by states. So I will focus from the research in the borders we have in Russian tradition, which is quite this realist tradition, to more to the concept of this mental borders and our behavior on these borders and how those borders affect who we are. And then there will be a necessary point of the social.
So thank you very much, Igor, for today's event. Thank you for my colleagues and our guests. This was a very interesting presentation and very interesting discussion. Please be a part of our events and discussions in the future as well, and stay up to date with our social media and webpage, and join us at our next event. Thank you all, and goodbye. We see you next at our next event, and hope we can meet with Igor sometime here in Budapest.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.